Daith da, how we doing? Welcome to podcast number 9. Before I start, I'd just like to thank everyone who wished me a happy birthday at the weekend. 'Tis scary really how the years are flying by, but with what I do every day, it does make you grateful that you're still here to tell the tale. So thank you very much. We had a good weekend. Had our grandsons on the Saturday. Sunday morning, we watched Mabon play football, and then in the afternoon, we whipped out Polseth and tried our new hobby that we've been doing for a few weeks, bodyboarding. Now, before you all go rushing out Polseth at the weekend, open to see dramatic action with me doing a hang 10 on the end of the board or whatever they do, I think you will be disappointed. I don't go out really deep. I'm afraid my swimming skills ain't up to that of Duncan Goodhue. I expect you picturing me now in me wetsuit, rubber ring and armbands. But dear Stuart Robertson, good old friend of ours, he saw me with the photo of me poured into me wetsuit down Polseth the other day, and within a matter of minutes he'd put on a photo of the Rock Inshore lifeboat, which he's a crew member, with his pristine yellow wellies parked neatly beside it, ready to be called should I need him. So there we are. Anyway, on to today's podcast. And as I said the other day, I will try and mix things up a little bit. There will be a lot of funeral content over the coming weeks, a lot of looking back at Wadebridge and North Cornwall when I was younger, etc. But today, I thought I would talk about my relationship with sport. I've always loved sport. Never been particularly good at anything, really. And if I'm honest, I think it's always come a second to the music. And it's really only over the last 6 or 7 years that the guitar has taken a little step back compared to the running and cycling. But I can always remember enjoying playing sport. And when I was young, Glen Road was a fantastic playground, really, for sport. As you went up the road, our house on the left-hand side was the first of the terrace, and just before that was the garden of Trevanion Road. And the lower part of Glen Road, they all had nice big gardens, and Mr. and Mrs. Collicutt lived next door to us, and I say their garden come out onto Glen Road, and they had a fantastic 5-bar gate there, which was a brilliant goal. And across the road was where Percy Bennett's had a fantastic white fence, quite long, again, ideal for a goal. And I think he used to keep all his surplus sand, cement and blocks and everything there. And that was where we used to play, mainly me and dear Noah, Ian Hobbs, after school, both Arsenal fans. So one of us would be the Arsenal first team and the other one would be Arsenal reserves, and we'd play matches against each other. The love of Arsenal stemmed from when we was at the boys' school. We had a new boy turned up in school, Steve Luke. In fact, I only saw Steve a few weeks ago, and we did talk about this. And Steve's father was one of the Lukes from out Rock St Mimber way, but he did move up to London. And then years later, they moved back down, and Steve come to school. And he was an Arsenal fan. Well, at the time, I didn't have a clue where Arsenal was, didn't even know it was in London. So there was a few of us there. We all became Arsenal fans. And I can remember there wasn't much telly then, and getting Father's Western Morning News every day to see if the Arsenal had played the night before and whether they'd won or no. Across the road from us was the other terrace, and at the end of this terrace is where Mr. Pedler lived. And dear of him, the side of his house was perfect for it and a tennis ball against, mainly during the fortnight when Wimbledon was on. So I would go up there balling the ball against the wall, and dear of him, he never come out and complained at all. And then that was at the junction at Brook Road, and if you went down the road at Brook Road, right down the bottom was Percy Bennett's Chapel of Rest, and just around the corner was Fairpark Terrace. I remember when we was kids, that area was known as Water Rat. and that's where Kevin Jenkinson lived. And in the summer, we would then play cricket down there with the likes of Kevin and Sean Thompson and Dave and Mark Armstrong. We had a good little gang down there. And when Percy's Chapel of Rest, when dear Percy passed away, Graham Bunt then moved in. I'm sure he's still there now with his local hero surfboard workshop. The boys' school was very sport orientated, mainly football as well. And our year 4, which was our last year, Arthur Harrison, he was the teacher there. He also used to help with the scouts in town, and he also run the football team there. As with most sports, I was pretty average, really. When I was up the boys' school, Mother used to reckon that the dirtier I got with me kit with the mud over it, the better I thought I'd played. And if on the odd occasion I'd scored a goal, when I come home, I'd have to reenact it to Mother and Father before I went to bed at night. When we moved up to the comp, I did dabble again with most sports. Again, pretty average, really. Although I did make it into the cricket team. I always reckon I was a poor man's version of Ian Botham. I was a medium pace bowler, usually 5th choice bowler, and I would go into bat at number 6 or 7. I think the only thing that I really resembled well with Ian Botham was a few years later when I had my permed streaked mullet, which was a pretty impressive thing to see, I must admit. When I left comp, the cricket club did actually ask me to come down to the nets beginning of the season when I was 16, but by then I was in 2 groups and we were gigging quite regularly, really, and I wouldn't have really made it, but it was nice of them to ask anyway. I didn't really do anything sporty then until my early 50s, and I'm thinking it would be about 2015, 2016, and Beth started running, so I thought I would start running too, and I absolutely hated it. So I thought, right, I'll start cycling. So got a mountain bike first, and then thought I'd get a road bike. So I got a good friend, Roger. I asked him, he was up on his bikes, and he suggested we went down to Redruth to see Ricky and we get sorted out down there. And so my obsession with cycling began. I was cycling every night then and weekends. I do mix it up a bit now. I still reckon I cycle 4 nights a week or a Saturday or a Sunday, but absolutely obsessed with it and would watch it on the telly whenever I could. And in 2016, we watched the Tour de France. And when it finished, I said to Beth, I wouldn't mind perhaps doing a ride from London to Paris. So we looked into it and contacted Alzheimer's Society, and it was all planned. So the following year, 2017, we were going to do the 4-day ride London to Paris. As many of you will know, by then Father's Alzheimer's had really taken hold, and we thought if we could raise a bit of money as well, it would, be a good thing to do. So we started our training, and all was going well until I had a message one night, Sunday evening, I'll never forget it, from Norman Trebilcock. For those of you who don't know Norman, he was a paramedic, and he started the charity fleet, raising funds for all the Cornwall ambulances to make sure that each ambulance had the same equipment and then continually upgrading it. And we'd known Norman for decades and his family knew Father's family before. And I say it was a Sunday evening and Norman sent me a message which went along the lines of, here, Breyer, you're getting fit now. Fancy running the marathon? So I said to Beth, I hate running. So I sent a message back. I said, thank you very much, Norman, but I'm not very keen on running, but thank you for thinking of us, and, we'll speak again. The trouble was, he'd sown the seed, and went to bed that night, thought it over. First thing in the morning, I said to Beth, well, perhaps we could do just a one-off. We'll do it once, and then that's it. So I sent him a message back and said, look, if 'tis still okay, yep, we will do the marathon, with the fleet team. So all was agreed. So from that moment on, the cycling training pretty much stopped. And it was a case of getting home late from work every night, going up to see mother, then having me tea, and then about 8:30, 9:00, going out in the cold, dark rain, doing me marathon training. So that was kind of January, February, March, ready for April for the marathon. As I said, I didn't enjoy it at all, really. I had a few aches and pains, and I feel sorry for all me workmates at work, because they certainly went through my training journey with me, and on more than one occasion I said I hate running. I said I'm glad once this marathon's over, that's it, I'm never going to do it again. As the day got nearer, I remember having a conversation with Bob Parkhouse. Bob's one of our bearers, and he'd run many a marathon. And I always remember him saying, don't start off too quick. Halfway point in a marathon is 20 miles. That last 6 is just as hard as the first 20. So I did bear that in mind as I got closer to the big day. So we travelled up with the fleet team on the bus the day before, signed in, and then went to our hotel ready for the race. The next morning we was up nice and early, little breakfast, and then we went to Blackheath. Now, as any of you know your history, that's not the best place for any of we Cornish, but that's where it was starting. And I vowed before, I'd said to him at work, I know that Norman and his boy Mike, they run every marathon carrying a blimmin' great St. Piran's flag. And I said, I ain't going to do that, because I said, I don't want to hamper myself, because I'm not confident with me running anyway. So as we were getting close to Blackheath, Norman said, right, who wants a St. Piran's flag? And what happened? Sure enough, up goes me hand. So I ran the marathon carrying the flag, which was proper, really, because there's loads of Cornish up there. So as you're running around, they see this blimmin' great flag flying in there, and you had lots of shouts of encouragement. The plan was for me and Beth to run together, but we got split up before the start, and I don't think we saw each other much at all, really. But yeah, I had a good race and all went well. We thanked Norman for our one-off chance to run the marathon, and headed home. And then over the weekend, the following Monday and Tuesday, we was chatting, and we said, well, perhaps it might be nice if we did try and run together. So I got in touch with Norman. I said, Norman, we're on for next year. So believe it or not, even though I hate running, we put our names down for the following year. And so the cycling training started in earnest. Being a bit naive, I thought, well, I'm fit anyway, so it'll be fine. But of course, you use different muscles for cycling and running. But we had a few weeks of doing a bit of cycling, and we was all geared up. And then me and Beth headed up for London for the start for the London to Paris. And guess where it was? Yet again, Blackheath. The first day went pretty good. It was a little bit hilly, but nothing like our hills down here, really. But we had to get to Dover by a particular time, just so that we could catch the ferry. But we did it with time to spare, and then went across into France, and then cycled to where we were staying for the night, where we actually did that bit in the dark, but all was well anyway. Day 2 of the ride, I'm sure that was the one where we had to cycle over 100 miles, but we was pretty confident, really, because it looked pretty much on the flat, not like down here. But what we didn't take into consideration is that there's no Cornish edges over there to keep the wind off me. And the blimmin' crosswinds, they was hellish, they was really. And we did get a little bit of rain, but we did it. My arm was all swollen up because the day before a blimmin' fly of some sort had bit my arm right down by my wrist when we was at Blackheath. So as you can imagine, 2 days of cycling with all the pressure down on me wrist and that was quite swollen up. But the ride went good, and so did day 3. That was another good ride, lots of lovely countryside. And then we were on to day 4 and the ride into Paris. Again, it was quite an early start on the last day because we had a few miles to go and we had to get to Paris by a certain time to meet up with the rest of the gang so that we would all cycle to the Eiffel Tower together. And I remember, crumbs, that was one of the most emotional days of my life. As you approach in Paris, the last 10 miles, it was quite tearful, really. All I could think about was Father, even though he didn't have a clue that I was doing it. And just to see all the other friends that we'd met, that we're still friends with now. We've met some lifelong friends who went on the ride with us, all of us in our Alzheimer's cycling tops. It was a very emotional thing. As we got into the centre of Paris, we quickly found out that the drivers there ain't so obliging as they are in the rest of the country. Before that, the drivers were fantastic. They would always, give way to cyclists. But once we was in the city centre, I remember at a junction, I just clipped in with me pedals, just pulling off, and a bloomin' Parisian taxi driver, he cut me up. I didn't get a chance to unclip me foot, and I went right over, right on me ankle. I did shout a few choice Cornish words at him, but he was gone by then. But was back on the bike, and then we headed to the meet-up for the Eiffel Tower, which was absolutely brilliant. When we got there, we was all hugging, and everything was quite tearful, really. And then the next thing, I heard this Cornish voice and said, "Hello, Mr. Bray." And I looked around and couldn't believe it. A fellow Bridger was stood there looking right at me. This was dear old Darren Grills and his Mrs. Tracy, and they'd come over to actually watch the Tour de France, and just by chance, they was there at the Eiffel Tower as we rolled up. So we had a good yarn with they and had a selfie, and then we headed back to the hotel. That night we hit the centre of Paris, went to a restaurant, had a meal with some of our other mates, which was brilliant. Back to the hotel, and then the next day it was good because we timed it. The ride we did coincided with the final day of the Tour de France. So we were there on the streets of Paris watching them come in, Chris Froome and all the gang. So I can honestly say I did get to Paris a day before Chris Froome. And we just had time to watch all of they, and then 'twas back on the train and back home to Cornwall. So for the rest of the year, 'twas pretty much cycling. And then the January, we started the training again for the next marathon. Our plan went a bit wrong when me and Beth were given different places to start, but we did agree that we would meet up as we was running and then run the race together. Now this year it was brave and hot, really, and I was a bit cocky, a bit confident after the following year, and I did start a bit too quick. And I can remember I did eventually meet up with Beth. I was easy to spot because you've guessed it. Again, for the second year, there I was carrying me St. Piran's flag. So she saw the flag. So anyway, we met up, but I realised quite early on that I was struggling a bit, really, and she was kind of edging away. I thought, beggar that. So I let her go on. I couldn't have kept up with her, but I did finish. I can't remember my time, actually. I don't know if I was slower than the previous year. I can't remember. But anyway, it was done. It was good. And I thought, well, at least that's me run finished now because I hate running. However, very quickly this time, I had a change of heart again. I felt I had unfinished business, really. I was disappointed with that run, so I said, Norman, we're on again for next year. So we booked our place. Once back from the marathon, 'twas straight on the bikes again, this time for Ride London. We had a few weeks training before we headed up. This is a 100-mile ride around the outskirts of London and finishing up in the city centre. And yeah, all went well with that, but we thought, perhaps we might do that again. We did find that quite enjoyable, really. A month or two later, I headed down to do the Land's End 100, and I was doing that with a few other Weybridge coasters. There's Damien Cudmore and Matt Kennelly were the two that I was going to ride with, and we were grouped up there. my cycling computer didn't kick in, so they started without me. The weather was awful, but I thought, well, I'll try and catch them up if I can. So I thought if we could ride together, that would be good. So I then sped off. I didn't realise I had actually overtook them. There was that many cyclists. But then as I was going through Mosul, there was a blimmin' car on a corner with there was a wet manhole cover. And of course, I went right over. The next thing I knew, I'd hit the deck. I didn't realise till afterwards I'd actually smashed the back of my helmet up. But I did shake myself up, really. I'd hurt my shoulder, but me hip was what was really hurting. And I did feel a bit dazed and confused, as the song goes. My chain had come off. Well, then with that, I did see Damo and Matt, and I said, look, I don't think I'm going to carry on. You lot carry on, I'll most probably head back. But by the time I managed to get my chain on, I was feeling a bit more with it, and I thought, beggar it, I think I will carry on. I still had about 50 or 60 miles to go, I think. But anyway, I got on and I finished it, and I met with them at the end. When I met him, Damo looked at me hip and he said, you want to go to the hospital about that? And honestly, it was swollen quite bad. So I went to the hospital and they had a look at it, thought it was just superficial. Nothing was broken. So I headed home. But as the next week or so went on, I was in agony. I'd mucked up my hip, but I'd done something to ligaments in my groin, and I was in quite a bit of pain, really. But as that pain kind of went, I then felt me collarbone and my shoulder was a bit sore. Went doctor again and ended up going Trelisk, and I did have a fracture, not a bad fracture, but a fractured collarbone, and they also picked up fractured ribs as well on the x-ray. So it was quite a nasty few months, really, and the time was going on, and I knew that I needed to start training for the marathon, but with me groin, I just couldn't run. So for all of January, I couldn't run. By now, Beth had decided anyway that she wasn't going to do the marathon, because the 2 previous years, when we would be getting up to about 18 miles for our training runs, she'd start having trouble with her knee, and she'd had a good second marathon, so it was whether I was going to do it or no. I contacted Norman and said, can he leave it as late as you can? And in the February, I then managed to start running. So I thought, beggar it, I'm going to give it a go and see what happens. So I did manage to get a few training runs in, and then again we headed up to Blackheath. Before I left, I said to him at work, right, this year I'm going to really go for it. So I want to get a half decent time. So I ain't going to carry the flag, and hopefully see how it goes. So we turned up at Blackheath ready on the Sunday, and Norman said, right, who wants a flag? What happened? Up goes my hand. Well, the race, it went absolutely brilliant. I paced myself a bit. I didn't start off too quick, but it went absolutely brilliant. And the last couple of miles was so emotional because I didn't know until a month or two before if I'd definitely be there. So one minute I was crying my eyes out, next minute I was laughing like a fool, then I was crying again, and what a feeling. And I said, God, this is brilliant. This is how I want to finish me running. I'm never going to top this, never going to top it. And it was a good race. Also, with just a couple of miles to go, I did see a familiar face, dear old Sharday. She lives, well, just a few hundred yards away from us here in Eglisale. So we had a good yarn as we was running, and they managed to catch a photo of that as well, which was very good. So as soon as we got back to Cornwall, 'twas back on the bikes again. And we did ride London for the second year. And this year we met up with a load of the Weybridge coasters, and we had a brilliant weekend. It was a real good ride, and it's something we'll never forget. Brilliant weekend. Throughout all this time, we'd kept in touch with Ricky Pascoe down at Redruth. Early on, we got a little bit of involvement with the St Piran cycling team that he formed. We sponsored them a bit, not in a big way, obviously, but we do a little bit of sponsorship for them, and 'tis a brilliant team, really. 'Tis set up to give youngsters the chance to get their first foot on the ladder of cycling, racing, nationally and internationally. And it's good to have a Cornish representation in the world of cycling. So I kept up my cycling, obviously not intending to do any more running, because I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but I hate running. We were at a party September, I think it was 2020, and our friend Natalie was there, and she said, "Oh, did you see that next month there's a virtual marathon? Are you going to do it?" So I said, "I doubt if I will. I hate running." And I said, I've been cycling and that. But of course, as with Norma before, she'd sown the seed. So the next day we chatted. I mean, Beth had still kept up her running a bit, but we thought, no, we will do the virtual marathon. We'll try and raise a bit more money for Fleet again. So we put our names down. So with this virtual one, on the day you start your computer watch going, and they just track your race, really. You could run wherever you wanted. So our plan was to run down to Padstow, because Mabon was playing football down there that day, then run back, grab a few gels in us, and then head up towards Bodmin, perhaps on the Camel Trail. But it all went wrong, really, because the weather was terrible. It was rough as router. And so we run down to Padstow. We watched Mabon for about 5 minutes, but we was that cold and wet. We then run out round Travone and tried to make a few miles there, and we made a few miles up, so much so that by the time we got back to Wade Bridge, we'd pretty much completed the marathon. Like an idiot, I was feeling a bit worse for wear, because we'd had no food whatever to keep us going. And it wasn't the fastest marathon I'd done, but I had done it. And because I didn't enjoy it at all, at least I said, well, that's the last time I'm doing it, because I don't know if I've mentioned before, but I hate running. I did bump into Norman last year, 2021, and he said to me, "Brayer," he said, "we still got a space if you want to do the marathon." This was only a couple of months before, like, kind of thing. But I said, "No, Norman," I said, "I ain't going to run no more." And I was so proud of myself, really, that I realised I got this running out of my system. So all was well. This summer, 2022, it was a bit hectic, really. We had 3 gigs lined up over 18 months. And of course, with COVID, they all got cancelled. So they all got rearranged within 7 days. So one weekend we had Guns N' Roses. The weekend before that, we was up London for 3 or 4 days, because we had Green Day and Red Hot Chili Peppers. So couldn't take me push bike up. So James went with me, and Days and Molly went as well. And James said, "Well, why don't us go for a little run while we're up there?" So on first morning up there, we went out for a little run, and I thought, oh, I quite enjoy this. So we did a run the next day, and we kind of enjoyed that too. So we had a bit of a chat, and we said, well, why don't us put in for the marathon in the ballot, and if we don't get in, we know that that's a sign and we won't run. So we both put in, and neither of us got in the ballot. So I said, tell you what, I'll ring Norman. So I spoke to Norman, and as I speak now, we have just had our spaces confirmed. So me and James, he's my eldest boy, for those of you that don't know, he's early 30s now. We're running the marathon next April. So I will keep in touch. We're raising funds for the ambulance again. And if you want me to, I'll just let you know how the training's going. So if you see me trudging around town at all, you can say hello, give me a bit of encouragement. I most probably won't answer it, because I'll have my earphones in. I need anything to spur me on a bit. I've tried lots of music over the years, but I always go back to Chili Peppers. They're the ones that seem to get me motivated the most. When I say you'll see me trudging around the town, I think that is the best adjective for my running, really. It's never been the most elegant. And I remember a year or two ago, me and Beth, we was doing a long training run. I think it was from St. Brewer to Padstow, I think. And these two posh holiday makers, they cycled past us on the bike, and he said it loud enough for us to hear. He said something along the lines of, he said, I can't believe I've seen some of the worst running styles ever today. And I was just thinking of something to say back to him quite loudly, a bit of Cornish dialect or something. And I thought, no, he's got a point. Yep, he's right. So I kept quiet. So I think that'll pretty much round up this week's podcast, really. I'm sorry I've gone on so long. Most of you have most probably dropped off to sleep by now. I just hope you weren't driving at the time. And but I will. I'll keep you updated with the running as it's going, as the training's going, and see how it goes. But like I said, did I ever tell you I hate running? So until next week, wish you well. Do Guinness.